Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, boys.
How's it going, man?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
The shot. Pink, pink, pink. That's the color of our interview today.
It is. It's
Love your data.
Thanks. So today on the Monday Morning Data Chat, who's turning out to be a fairly regular guest now, Scott Taylor.
So. Yeah, this is like my second time on this. And then I was on your podcast, Joe.
Yeah.
And then the other day I was touring around. I saw the both of you on like a different show. So how many shows do you guys have?
I don't know. I guess
Joe has a few.
Let's say that. Joe has not regular. This one's the most regular one, but I'll do some others like on Wednesday and Friday and like various other shows. So there's pop-up shows. They're pop-up shows.
Like a media conglomerate. I'm going for my 5-timers jacket on Monday.
Okay. We'll get you
two in. I'll keep count. Don't worry. I'll let you know.
Cool. Yeah, we'll get you a members only jacket for
I'll send you the size here. So 42 regular if you're ordering.
Oh, really?
Hi, everybody. Good morning on this day of love.
Day of love. Cool, man. What you been up to since the last time we spoke?
I was up at 5:30 this morning looking at Venus, which is at its brightest it will be for the whole year, which is just beautiful cosmic universal poetry for Valentine's Day, that the goddess of love shines the brightest above us all this morning. Take a look tomorrow morning, all you listeners, if you're getting up early. Take a look to the east and you will see Venus screaming bright up in the air, but reminded us that today is a day of love. We got to love our data. We have to love our data. Do you love your data? That's the question I have for everybody out there. Are you taking care of your data? Are you comforting your data? Your data needs to be fresh. It needs to be clean. It can't be corrupted or dirty. You got to make sure you love that data so those analytics come out good. And
we don't want impure data.
What?
No. Right, so we don't want our data to be impure or treated badly. So
I think that's a problem. Certainly at the poetic level with a lot of enterprises, they don't love their data enough. They demand too much of it without giving it the love and support that it deserves and needs to be able to serve them well. I mean, any relationship is a give and take. You know, are you listening to your data? Are you taking directions from your data? You know, what about data driven? Are you letting the data drive every once in a while? These are questions you should be asking yourself strategically out there.
Especially on Valentine's Day.
It's got to be reciprocal.
FYI to the audience, we heard that comments on LinkedIn aren't making it through to StreamYard where we're broadcasting from, so I'll do my best to read off questions as they show up.
I'm sure they're flooding in. Yeah.
They're flooding in right now. I mean, we have some comments from Kay, we got some comments from Rabbit.
Kate's there. Hi, Kate, as always. So, there we go. I can't.
But anyone has any questions, comments, any data love stories they want to talk about, any
data love stories,
confessions, you know, we're here for you for the next hour. So that's cool, man. So you've been doing some talks lately, conferences?
I've been doing some talk. I did a conference in December, which was a blast. So I seem to be able to be timing my travel like in between outbreaks, new variants. So in between Delta and Omicron, I was able to fit in a keynote, the first time on stage in over 2 years in San Diego at the Data Governance Information Quality Conference run by Dataversity. I love those guys. And I had a ball. Yeah, and in my usual humble fashion, I must admit I killed that day. It was great. It was great. And people seem relieved to kind of like laugh a little bit about the data space. So I'll be posting some clips starting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What have you seen since COVID started with, I guess we'll talk about conferences first and then sort of what you say, people wanting to get some humor around data. Start with conferences. Like what's changed, I guess, since COVID started? Because I know you're a professional speaker. This is like what you do. And so.
They were not. I mean, they were drying up. So obviously during COVID there was nothing physical. So I think I practiced a lot on being digital and virtual and got really much better at that with techniques and kind of setting stuff up right. I'm in a new space now where we're going to set up in a little more official kind of formal studio environment. So that's a work in progress, but definitely investing there. And so for me, shifting my business and my focus to being able to deliver what I do in a digital way. I went through my own personal digital transformation.
Yeah.
because before COVID, I had to physically be somewhere to do what I do most of the time. And now I clearly don't. I mean, when conferences come back, I'm sure I'll be a part of it. Nothing replaces kind of that physical interaction. But where are they, right? Gartner pushed it off for a couple more months. Like, oh, we're coming. I was like, new conference, physical. And then it's like, oh, no, we're going to be hybrid. No, we're going to be digital. It's like, and so I'm sure people are dealing with this craziness. And I know a lot of companies aren't letting their folks travel, whether they want to go or not. So the whole conference model, I think, is hopefully the producers out there are taking a hard look at how to do what they do. Because, people, I think people got used to getting enough value out of not having to get on an airplane and go somewhere for 4 or 5 days. And you're going to be able to, I think conferences in the physical sense are going to need to really step it up to have a reason to be there versus just kind of, getting 2/3, 3/4 of it over their screen. But hasn't stopped people from wanting to interact. So we're still trying to connect up in one way. That's the driving force, right? How do we get in front of each other in some way to kind of share what we think?
Let me ask you this too. Have you seen a difference in demand for data consulting, data advising? I think in general, what we saw and what other commentators have said in the data space is that when the COVID crisis arrived, all these businesses discovered that they did not have the insights they needed to cope. And it turned out the business was going to be good pretty quickly, but you needed data to make business good. And suddenly they were just scrambling around, buying new BI tools, trying to find talent to handle data. And I assume you saw some difference in the demand for your consulting services.
Yeah, I mean, it was driving up everywhere. So even, the analytics side, you have more view in that. I look more on the data management side, kind of, MDM, reference, all that stuff, but it's all goes together. It's all connected, as we've talked about before. But there was an increase in all of that. So I've got some friends in the analyst space who told me early on, and it's been published since then, that inquiries for basic master data management, data governance, foundational data activity, calls were up 20-30%. And you're right. So people were not just realizing they didn't have the analytics, they didn't have the base foundational data to get done. So, when we talk about everybody having a common view of customer, but when you're in a room with somebody and kind of, well, let's look at it this way. But if you're trying to be much more digital, and the case of COVID, right, purely digital, then you've got to have the data there that everybody trusts to make whatever kind of action, take whatever action you need to take on it. And I don't think that's going to go back. Right. I read a great article, it was in a quick service restaurant magazine the other day, or post, their site. They were talking about kind of fast casual. That, Chipotle, Panera, that kind of middle group between, fast food that we know, and then kind of casual sit down restaurants. There's that sub channel in there, fast casual as a concept. They took a big dip, but it just went story after story after story of operators that then came out of it through self-service, through app-based ordering, through putting in drive-through. All of that takes data and systems.
Well, it's kind of shocking how much is not automated, right? Let's say 2020, how much was not automated that maybe has shifted toward automation now. And all of that requires data. All of that relies on data. It's something that Joe and I call, and a lot of other people call, a data app. In other words, the data is not just analytics, it's analytics that directly feed what's happening to the customer almost instantaneously.
Yeah, I mean, that's all that, right? We all wanted that, but if you didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Then you better get that data right. And the people, as usual, people who had the data right, are probably doing better.
They did great.
How many times do we have to say this? I just don't. I don't get it. But I think we also
probably a lot, actually,
again and again.
I think we suffer from the fact from the many ways we try to articulate it, and so this kind of dissonance and static in the data space, data and analytics space around people. I was picking on somebody's post this morning who did, you want to trigger me? Do a post that says data has no value until I make it into analytics, and you'll get me, both barrels, because I hate that kind of stuff. It's like, why do you have to be zero sum there? Why do you have to say data's no good until, you're what they're saying? And I actually wrote this to the guy. He's like, what do you mean? I said, why do you have to say your work? Why do you have to say my work isn't important until you do your work? That's literally what you're saying to half the community. And the words we use, the terminology we use, the fights we have about ways to describe it. Do we draw it as a circle? Do we draw it as a triangle? No, it's an upside down. No, there's 4 phases. No, there's 5. It's like, I come from the business side, and business people don't have time to listen to all these rough draft metaphors and similes and new ways to talk about what we already know. And you look at that, you just, you don't hear that from other departments. So kind of my feeling about our space, which I love and I'm part of, is we got to get, we got to get our stories clearer and more straightforward and less flowery and less trying to come up with the new word for the new cool thing. Just get it done. So
amen to that. I mean, like, we've been in the data space for a long time. You've been in it longer than I have, but I mean, point being, but we're counting in decades now, right? And so
yeah.
Who cares?
I'd be in the 3-decade club, not somewhere, or at least
exactly. Yeah. And what I find interesting too is I'd like to get a perspective on this. It feels like a lot of the same underlying, I guess, challenges are still pervasive today, right? Like, do I trust the data? Tool vendors come and go. You and I've seen this. Matt's seen it too. Vendors come and go, pitching, the latest solutions, whatever. I think these solve point problems, but they solve symptoms. They don't solve the underlying issues. But again and again, it's the questions come back to, well, do I trust data, for example? Do I trust you? Right. And like, where's value being added and so forth? This is exactly the same questions and same themes that I personally saw, a long time ago. And love to get your take on this.
Yeah.
Has it always been like this?
I agree. Yeah. We're in, graphically violent agreement on that one. It's the raison d'etre of a lot of these new platforms, if you will, the reason for being of the hottest, let's call the hottest thing now, the data mesh. You hear the intro, it's the same stuff we've always heard. I'm not discounting their solution. But, today you hear, well, there's multiple silos and they don't trust the data and there's not, you can't get it fast enough and IT's in the way. I'm like, I got to check my calendar to see what decade I'm in, much less what century, when I hear that, because I go, this sure sounds a whole lot like, when I got into the space and you thought it was new. It's one of those, I don't know the answer. I don't know how to solve it. But I do feel that part of the solution is, as always, getting the data better up front is going to solve a lot more problems downstream than trying to deal with it later. And part of that, I think data sharing is a great notion that's also becoming more popularized here, because that's going to force people to get data in a consistent fashion that another party can use it quickly. And that's also going to help sort of standardize data across departments, across parties, across ecosystems, across marketplaces. When you do that, a lot of other problems go away. You don't need a lot of this other stuff later to fix it. If you start with, if people start, at least theoretically, with something closer to the same than different, you will end up with something better than you will. Again, I'm speaking almost symbolically here. But so I don't hear a lot of these. Solutions coming out. These big ideas coming out and saying, "Okay, what we should do is fix it at the source. Here's how we fix this process of, customer create, or standardizing entities in a given vertical so everybody has a common view of it." Speaking really generically, but that could be brands, that could be media vehicles, that can be people, that pick an entity type. But how do we start to standardize those more up front to make literally everything else smoother along the way?
Something Matt and I've been talking a lot about lately is exactly what you're talking about. Because if you do a kind of a value stream map exercise too, of kind of where issues are addressed right now, there's a whole new slew of data quality tools, but they all fix things at the data warehouse level. But at that point, it's kind of it's great you're fixing it there, but it doesn't address the fact that the data is still messed up upstream. And so we've been talking a lot about this. How do you better address source systems just from the beginning, whether it's new processes, better definitions up front or whatever? Because the thing that's catalyzing this discussion is streaming data.
Yeah.
And so we're moving, away from, sort of a batch first world towards, real time in almost every capacity. And that introduces, I would say, just a higher velocity of sort of breaking changes and doing potentially dumber things more quickly. Right. So
we can be dumber at scale.
Yeah.
That's the opportunities that we'll miss if we're dumber at scale.
We'll make it up in volume.
Yes, exactly. Make it up in volume.
I mean, but how do you? Okay, so we can think of MDM in terms of two different levels. You can think of an analytics team, say a data warehouse team that does care about foundations, trying to work on MDM problems, or ideally, you work on the application level before it even arrives into analytics. But how do you motivate the application side of the company to do MDM right so that it becomes easier downstream in the analytics side? And especially with streaming, the problem is that in some sense, there's no time to fix the data, right? Like you can't fix the data in batch if it's arriving real time. It's got to be correct when it arrives, maybe with just slight tweaks.
Yeah, because otherwise you're doing a continuous query that doesn't ever stop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there a standard that they can, align to? That's, again, it's you sort of start there. And even the word standard will have different contexts, right? So there's standard integration between software, there's standard schemas, but you got to fill that stuff with the right, again, sort of standardized content. But there's a tendency for people to start to, try and create their own language, their own data language.
Yeah.
And, I mean, programming language, but data language, like, okay, this is how we define an entity, and this is a channel or a category, or this is the hierarchy, and this is the geography. A lot of those things exist places. There's syndicated providers, there's vertical standards in different industries. And I'm a big fan of all of those, despite the fact that so many of them, but their reason for being is to provide some commonality between parties. That's why one reason that standards exist. And you deal a lot with this idea that, yes, everybody does want to see things one way, their way. So they tend to use it like, okay, this is how I want to do it. But there's got to be some give and take there, or the idea that, all right, we have an internal way to look at it, but when we integrate and interoperate, communicate externally, we have a different way to look at it. That's okay, as long as it's consistent. And when you get to, despite all the MDM you might do and all the analytics and data science you might do, if you're sitting in a room between two parties and one thinks there's 6 of something and one thinks there's 9 of something and 3 of them are the same, but the others are, that's all they're going to talk about, right? So those kinds of things I think are fixable once you set a standard, once you have governance, and part of the way to do that too, to answer part of your question, Matt, is, you got to start at the top too. The organization leadership has to be behind this. And if they're not behind something called MDM because they don't know what it is, then at least get them behind the idea of setting a standard for our organization. We do it in manufacturing. What if you didn't have standards in manufacturing? What if everybody could make their own, screws and nuts and bolt sizes just because that's the way they like it? Nothing would fit.
Yeah. And maybe that's the point with data mesh too, right? Like data mesh, in principle, you have the people who are actually working on the source data, also working on the output data, making sure it's consistent. You have to set standards for what these teams need to do and what they need to deliver and give them the appropriate incentives so they can deliver that. Otherwise, they're going to be too busy with their application to worry about who's going to consume the data downstream.
Well,
that's the
data mesh paper they have, the underlying governance federation layer too. But I guess
that was in there. By the way, that was a late entry, so I followed.
Yeah, it was
closely.
The second article.
Yeah, it was like, all right, the first time we need these 3 things, and then came back and went, oh, by the way, we need data governance. Again, I'm in the bleachers going, oh, what a surprise.
Yeah, I wonder what could be next, though. I mean, for better or for worse, I think it's, data mesh as a concept it's here to stay. And I know it's polarizing. I do like the notion. It reminds me a lot of what microservices did to software development, where at least it got people kind of operating out of like a highly coupled monolith. And, but it had its own set of challenges too. Moving to microservices. I think a lot of cases with microservices, tech teams are just moving to it without really thinking, oh, do I need this, or can I get away with a monolith to start? I mean, I was writing about this the other day. I think I can make an argument in some cases monoliths are actually way easier to start with. But the whole thing is that you have to have the discipline in order to want to break out eventually into microservices. Otherwise, you're just going to keep bloating out this monolith. I think same thing sort of applies with data. I mean, you have to have the intention of doing it right. And I'd like to get your take on this, because it seems like data sort of reaches a critical mass or a critical point where like this event horizon where it's almost too late to change anything. So
we've talked about this before. It's like, when is a good time to start? You want to start at least thinking about it early, and you'll see these effects, right? You have hierarchies that don't, your reports won't tie out, your numbers won't make sense. People will argue about the and you're defending the methodology. I mean, the evidence is everywhere. And this notion that you can't sharpen your saw because you're too busy cutting is something that is rampant in the data space. Oh, sure. Well, we got to do this analytics, so we can't fix the data because we're doing it's like.
But does it seem like the incentives though might be like you're paid to cut, you're not paid to sharpen?
But you're all, I don't know how you incentivize analytics people to make sure they use data spend time to make sure they use data that's better, and work with data managers. I mean, look at our own space, right? So if you look at data scientists, I've said this a billion times, right? They seem to be proud of the fact that they spend 60 to 90% of their time munging and wrangling. What again, I have two questions about that. One, if you spend 90% of your time doing something that isn't your job title, then what are you? And two, how about we just kind of like get rid of some of that wrangling? You need to do all that munging. Do you have an enterprise data governance department that doesn't even know you, or you don't even know?
Very possible.
So you're, and if you want things to be in production, then you need to leverage the standardized data that an organization has. And organizations do have that, whether it's pervasive, whether it's kept, whether it's always adopted or not, there is a core somewhere. You just got to find it. And, any enterprise has got some kind of enterprise data set, usually starts with customer and product, because if you don't have relationships, you don't have brands, you don't have a business. So that's, tends to be the most important data around, data domains, if you will. And, start leveraging that stuff, let's stamp out munging in our lifetime. Can we? Our children don't have to munge so much or wrangle. I forget which is which, but I don't even care which is which. But it's just, so how are we numb to that, right? How are we numb to this admission of so much wasted effort, almost like a, rite of passage? How much munging did you do today? I don't know.
I think 80%. People ask that, like, how much data you munched in your life? It kind of, I thought of a pretty funny scene. Did you ever watch Office Space with the Bobs?
I remember which scene. So it's
the Bobs, the guys who.
Two guys named Bob.
You just reminded me, like, maybe there's a data governance department who interview people, analysts who don't even know what they do. So I don't know. Probably happens.
I don't know. I worked at a very large data company, and I met with a group whose job it was to unduplicate efforts. They were trying to find ways that they overlapped other stuff. And they told me that they found 3 other groups in the organization whose job it was to unduplicate efforts.
Wait,
like,
what?
oh, this is suspicious.
You're kidding.
No, absolutely. A very large data company. But, you almost can't blame them. Grown by acquisition, 100 countries, lots of people. It happens. But those who have it right excel. Those who have it, no pun intended, those who have it right are driving where the markets are going. And if you want to know who has it right, then take a look at all the top companies we always talk about, right? Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, they have the data, at least in their interfaces with their customers, that makes the stuff work. And, it's an experience that you get spoiled by. I've got no connection to Amazon, but I made the mistake of buying an item from directly from a manufacturer a couple weeks ago, and I am still in the process of trying to get a problem reconciled. And I couldn't help, after literally an hour on the phone, talking to 5 different people, telling them my customer information 3 or 4 times, and I get like, talk about getting triggered. You start asking me to confirm my email address.
Do you know who I am?
You don't want to hear from me on the other end of the phone. I'm like, I couldn't help but saying at one point, if this was Amazon, I'd already have my money back and this would be fixed.
Yeah.
Because they just, they don't ask you a bunch of, we want to confirm your zip code. And you're just like, really, can I get to my problem? So there's my own research of one over the last week here.
Well, you got to research it too. I dealt with the same thing with one of the most, I would say, expensive luxury furniture makers in the world. Sent me a nice table that happened to be broken. So I get to deal with that mess, and that's going to take a long time. This same place can't even tell you what they shipped you or when it will arrive. They have no idea. It's crazy. So I mean, they got nice stuff for the most part, but I'm just shocked. You call up, they're like, we don't know where that is. It's like, what do you mean you don't know where it is?
In transit. It's in transit.
Yeah. And then they say, call the shipper. So call the shipper, and you got to call the manufacturer back.
So it hadn't been shipped yet or something.
It's some Kafka novel. I'm like, what the
Yeah, so we all hate that, right? We all hate that. Now, folks who have, common systems, they have it accessible, they have, and we know behind the scenes. So when we're having that challenge with somebody, we know more of why they can't get to our stuff than they do, because we understand data and systems and software and all the rest of it going on. It just makes it even more frustrating for somebody in the trade. But there's no, people, the expectations are set by those who have great data to create a wonderful, seamless customer experience. We all love that. So
yeah,
got to get on it.
Gotta get on it. Unless you have a moat because everyone buys your overly priced stuff, I guess. Got a question here from Ed Mitchell, actually. And sorry for the audience. The StreamYard is not allowing comments to pop through, so we can't quite show these in the screen.
No comments here, but
no comments, but no comment from Ed. So he asked, what do you do with a huge company? It's a product distributor with zero analytics outside of their e-commerce site. And he follows up by asking, do you start fresh with new data and new data capture processes, or do you clean a decade's worth of data?
I'd start with what you got. What kind of data you're talking about? So if it's a distributor, they have, I don't know what they make. I don't know where they are. This is totally off the cuff answer. But if they're a distributor, they already have a set of data about their relationships between the manufacturers they represent and distribute for, and the locations and operators that they bring that product to in whatever form. Those exist. You don't want to start new there, and that's where a lot of your opportunities are, right? So how do you help those manufacturers sell more? How do you help those retailers sell more? That's, as a distributor, you sit in the middle there. You probably have also a set of the corresponding products and brands and SKUs that exist within that as well. The more categories that distributor represents, the more complicated that's going to be. And then you have a set of geographies that you already market in or deploy in. Again, I'm trying to talk as generically as possible. You got to start with all that stuff. That's what the business understands. They understand markets, they understand relationships, they understand products, they understand stuff's got to move. How are you as a data person going to help that? And there's what I also think is a good way to look is go find where the problems are in the business, and then figure out how the data you've got might be able to help those problems, rather than saying, I just invented this new thing. Where can I use it? It's, again, even if it ends up being the same thing, part of it's about the positioning. People want help solving problems. And part of what excites me continually about the data space is we're the only department that can help everybody else in the company. The only one. Okay. So, and data as an element, and when I say data in this sort of tonality, I mean the whole space, data analytics, the whole thing can transform a business like no other discipline at a company can consistently. And when you think disciplines, marketing, sales, finance, legal, operations. Data can help all of those, and none of those have the same chance to transform a company. Again, talking generically, but you might market your way into a brand new world or a new approach. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But data can help an organization literally transform what it does. And that's what keeps me going around this space, is just kind of knowing that.
I was going to ask what's kept you around for the last 30 years.
Yeah. It's just like, this stuff's great. And part of what I believe keeps us from the progress that we should have is the way we talk about it.
Yeah.
It's very simple. Just simply the way we discuss it, the way we describe it, the way we pitch it. Obviously, plug for me. Wrote a whole book about it, telling your data
nice.
story. But that was the point here. It was like, that's what I'm good at, right? So in all these almost 30 years, what is my best skill is being able to talk about it in a clean, consistent way that gets somebody who has the money that you want for the funding for your program to go from, I have no idea what you're talking about, to how do we live without this?
Right.
That's what you want to, and not everybody can do that. I can't do, when they say yes, I can't do that work. We all got a part to play. That's mine. Mine is like getting them excited, getting them interested, getting them committed. Then there's others who will then do the actual work, as I like to put it. And I respect their competencies tremendously, because without them, I'm just a story. So there's this combination approach. But when I'm talking to other data people and they're bickering with me, I'm not saying I'm always right, but they're telling me, well, analytics is really more important.
Yeah.
It's like, really? Then why are you a data scientist? No. Why aren't you an analytics scientist? Data is a good word when you want to use it, but all of a sudden it's worthless in your other, outside the, by the time you finish the paragraph. It's and mesh and fabric and warehouse and lake house, again, disassociating the I'm sure technical and value of those things. You're introducing new phrases, foreign words to part of the organization that's barely understands the basics of what you're talking about. And if we just kind of keep going with mesh or fabric for a moment, those things, again, the raison d'etre is exactly the same. You walk into your CEO and say, here's the first slide says, here's the situation. You'd be like, I've been here every time you come in, you tell me this. Silos, can't get analytics fast enough, can't trust the data. We need to change the culture. It's like, that's a lot. What are you going to do? Those things come on really heavy, right? And then you go, okay, now for our next magical trick, the things that's going to fix it this time is what we, just came up with last week. That has a pithy term. And I wonder, what the credibility level is to some of those discussions on the folks who are looking for that funding and looking for that help. I just kind of wonder. So anyway, me, I'll rant all day for you guys, but and part of the solution, again, come back to it, is speak the language of the business.
Yep.
Don't think about coming up with the new coolest term. Okay. I mean, I think data lakehouse is a ridiculous sounding thing. Okay. And I know you invented it, Joe, but reverse ETL, not the lakehouse, but reverse ETL sounds a little bit wacky to me. I mean, I put reverse ETL on my auto ML, and now my data is running backwards in circles. So I don't know what to do about it. But, think about the words. It's like, okay.
It enables time travel too.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, no, I know the guy who invented the term reverse ETL, and I kind of poked at him because I was like, I actually have a better one called BLT, bidirectional load and
much
transform.
tastier.
I was like, the terms are funny. Actually, Scott, George Farrakhan, what's up, George? He's got a question for you. He asked, what's your favorite data analogy to sort of go along with this?
Food is my favorite analogy topic. Thank you, George, for setting that question up. food seems to everybody. Again, I'm trying to be the poet in the room. I'm trying to be the guy to help you tell the story. All right. So that's my role there. So think about the accessibility of a food analogy. Everybody's got to eat. So they all have that experience. And you can't have a good meal unless you have good ingredients, but you also need to know how to cook. And you need to have the right tools, but just because you bought a new omelet pan doesn't mean you know how to make an omelet yet. I mean, talk very slowly, but something around, I've found that that's the best kind of analogy category to break through to folks. My professional advice to people when they're trying to create that data story about data management in their organization is find an analogy. And if food isn't perfect for you, look at your own business. Look at what your business does and try and relate data as an as analogous to your business. So if you're in a healthcare company, data is the lifeblood of our organization. A healthy business runs off healthy data. Or, I heard a guy from the Department of Defense present once, and he talked about how data is the payload of our business. Not everybody can use that one, but in his case, it worked great, right? So it's, and those things have an incredibly powerful effect when used correctly, and better than my least favorite one, which is, data is the new oil, because we don't even agree what that means.
Well, and it's misinterpreted, right? I mean, the economists coined this phrase, and everyone interprets it as data is really valuable, but they're really talking about data monopolies and the ability to control the market.
My friend.
Exactly.
Yes, you win. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a data OPEC then.
I think they're saying there is a data OPEC. Yeah, exactly.
You and I are the only ones who've actually read the subhead of that article.
I have a subscription.
Putting it in the first page of our deck to present, like, data's the new one. But there's these two factions, at least two factions in the debating space, talking about how it is the new oil, how it isn't the new oil. I take a step back and go, the fact that we can't agree whether it's oily or not, or whether oil is positive or negative.
Emit CO2.
Yeah. Or is it, it's sustainable, it's not sustainable. No, it doesn't pollute, but you can reuse. It's like all that shit. Like, we're not going to come to an agreement. And again, the people who are no longer in the room with the money you want have left confused.
Yeah.
It's
super true.
I'm just trying to help. So I'm just trying to help people get the dough they need and the support they need and the engagement they need. And it isn't, it doesn't always work if you're trying to teach them a new language, or in the case of data mesh, with all respect, almost feels like a new way of life. The meshies out there talk a little bit, it's almost like it's a new belief system, like the way they are enamored with it, which is somewhat admirable, but also a little bit scary.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, I was in the data mesh Slack group, kind of lurking around several months ago, and I noticed there was a post that says no one has challenged the official definition of data mesh, and it's something along those lines. And we're just kind of thinking, that. What word did you just use, Matt?
Cult. I called it.
I mean, so it felt like that kind of a vibe. Like, again, not saying it is.
Yeah.
But when you start saying you can't agree with terms, you can't disagree with terms, for example, and certain truths are absolute. I think in physics this is true, but even physics is things like we're always open to reviewing ideas, right, and experimentation. But to say by edict that something is immutable and can't be disagreed with, I think it's to me, I don't know. I felt kind of icky.
I think there's some basic terminology in that concept that is very confusing. So the word domain, talking about how domain already means domain in the data mesh context, as far as I can tell, means department, right? Group of people. Multi-domain MDM means not MDM for a group of people. It means the domain of customer, its type of data, the domain of product, the domain of asset. So you have domains handling domains, then flip around. Then product is the one that I truly have. I wonder how well that plays. So if you go up to somebody and say, we're going to monetize our data product, and you say that to somebody who's got no experience in data, but as like a leader in your business, they're going to think you're going to sell data.
Yeah.
Monetize in every other context other than the data space means, what's the root of the word? Monetize? Money. It means money. It means you're getting money for it. Now, there's lots of ways to capture value, and money is everybody's favorite. But all of a sudden, all you're going to do is get to the second half of the first sentence when somebody's talking about data monetization, and they'll say, well, we mean capturing value and delivering value, growth and improvement, and that's ends up being indirectly monetizable because okay, but that's different than what you led with. Okay, you said we're going to make money off of data products. Well, we don't really mean product. It's not really a product like you sell a product like we have a brand. It's actually a product of. Okay, so we're 3 minutes in and I'm completely confused.
I mean, I always use this as my litmus test as a bobblehead of Warren Buffett. I always keep it on my desk, just as a reminder to, I think, keep things simple. And if you're talking to, a guy like Warren, how are you going to communicate in the most effective way, right? You're going to talk about mesh or, observability. You're going to talk about outcomes and what are you going to get out of this, right? And so I always take that to heart. Where it's just, and you talk about this in your book. Actually, I'd like to talk more about your this book. You spent a lot of time writing. Actually,
I love talking about my book. Yes.
Yeah, but you did a really good job. I think going buzzword free, 99%.
I didn't want
Scott Taylor's the only buzzword. Just kidding.
The other 1% of all 1%
did
of all.
Not want to overpromise.
Let's walk through some nomenclature and or some words real quick. Like how does one think about simplifying the way they communicate about data?
One is to speak in business language. Get rid of the technical terms. Think about, all right, you're going to start a conversation. Do you need to first teach somebody a whole bunch of nomenclature that they don't know yet? If the answer is yes, then find a different way to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a mesh and a fabric and a this and monetize it, but you're using terms that they already have a definition for or don't understand at all. And I've been in sales my whole life, so that's where I got good at this. All right, had to make quota, carrying around stuff in a bag. You got to go in, and you got to get somebody from who the hell are you to okay, I'll sign. Right? And I even did door to door, so that's how hardcore I was. You don't have a lot of time to mess around with some fancy introduction, and your first couple of moments are the most critical of any kind of pitch. And that's what it is. It's a pitch. So data storytelling, as I define it for data management, you're selling this stuff in. That's what you're doing. You're trying to get sponsorship. You're trying to get engagement. You're trying to get money, funding to do this work. And it's usually an internal audience. And so you got to, I think you've got to structure it at least in a sales, not salesy, because sales tends to be a bad word by people who aren't in sales.
Even though they're selling every day.
Oriented way. I think there's nothing wrong with that discipline. It powers everything. I got a poster here somewhere from my dad who gave me, who was a salesman as well. I'm fourth generation, by the way. And he had this poster made up in his office. It just said, a terrible thing happens if nobody sells. Nothing. And that's, so you think about, get some sales training, get some ways to convince people the benefits of what you have to offer.
For sure.
But use analogies, use storytelling, use all those techniques, but start with where your company has challenges. And if you think your company doesn't have challenges, you're not looking closely enough. And I had a pretty good record of going in at high levels at organizations and talking to business leaders about the need for structured data, a topic very few of them were exposed to at the level that I brought them to, having not met them, but being able to articulate in some conceptual way, here are the core issues of your company, and I can bring those back to something about your lack of foundational data. And you do that through homework. Okay, It's just work. If it's a public company, they've got an annual report. They've got an investor day presentation. They have interviews with their CEOs. Watch CNBC and watch somebody they'll talk about almost always, they'll talk about brands that they have, and they'll talk about relationships that they're developing and how's the data you've got on your brands and your relationships. And you can start start there, because in most cases, it's not going to be as good as it needs to be. And those are, again, I'll submit to everybody, those are the two most important kinds of data that any organization has. And it gets, doesn't get the love it deserves, back to our topic of the day.
Can you show them the value based on their maybe not ideal data and say, look, let's look at your data right now. This data has value. Here's why it's valuable. However, it could be 5 times more valuable, or some random number, if we did these things to improve the foundations. Does that type of pitch work?
Yeah, I think yeah. I did. An example of that, I think, is I used to work at Nielsen. So Nielsen, we had a database. This is where I got started in the data business. We had a database of all of the store locations in the country. Okay. And we went to manufacturers and they put their products in those stores, and retailers have lots of different hierarchical levels. So, as consumers, you just know the outlet you walk into, this, Safeway or 7-Eleven or Walmart or whatever it is. But there's hierarchy on top of it. There's supply locations, there's buying offices, there's divisions, there's corporate, there's headquarters, there's global, ultimate. There's lots of different levels of hierarchy. It gets really complicated really quickly. So we went into a company. It was Red Bull. I can name the name now. It was definitely a couple decades ago. They were just coming to the US. So that's how they were just setting up the distributor system. We got some examples of their retailer data, the way they tracked these retail locations and the hierarchy they put on it. We spent a couple days taking their version of a retailer, putting it against our version of a retailer. We had a nicely designed pitch where they were always red for Red Bull. We were always blue for Nielsen. And we just kind of compared them. But the dramatic trick I used was we did this in increasing order of difficulty. And so we didn't start with the worst stories. We started with, we looked at this market, and you've got, I'm making these numbers up, but it's equivalent. You've got 57 of these stores, and we have 60. So you're missing 3, we think. That's not that we're missing. There might be duplicate. But okay, yeah. And then we got a little more complicated. Then we got a little more complicated. We had 10. I got to number 6. And when we got to 6, the COO put his hands in his head, and he just went, when he's like, enough. We get it. It was one of the top 10 days in my selling career, was just to see this guy just crumble. And
there, basically.
He was like, talk to Janet, who was our person. She's like, we got to get you in front of the COO. This is stuff's going to, we'd already sort of proved our way, but he was the person who knew nothing about this data management, yet needed to understand the value in a really specific way. And it was not an insignificant investment we were looking for. And what was also part of the skill of that approach was at 6, when he said, okay, enough, we moved on. Nobody said anything like, we got 4 more examples. You got to see those. No, we did all this. Let us show you everything. It's like, that's how you blow the sale. So another thing, early on, another thing my daddy taught me, and I think I actually have it in the book. When you get the yes, shut up. Okay.
Yeah. One of my mentors said the same thing.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you don't talk, but you don't keep pushing, because you can. And he taught me that lesson after I came back from a sale. I did put this in the book, where I came back from a sale that they said yes, but then by the time the meeting was over, they changed their mind only because I didn't shut up. I kept talking. I literally said, that's great. It's going to be as good as last year. And they were like, well, we didn't like last year. There were some problems with what we did before. We're like, what? They're just like, no. I was working for my dad at the time, and I come back, he's like, oh, no. It's like, son, now it's time to learn this important lesson. When you get the yes, shut up.
Yeah, part of me wishes everyone would have to work sales, or at a minimum, I think, have a customer-facing job. Like what my kids, when they're old enough, they're going to be either working sales or working like food or retail. And it's not because I hate them. It's because I want them to have experience dealing with the public, dealing with difficult people, and getting past challenges.
Yeah, on your feet. Yeah, it's great. It's great training no matter what. Procter & Gamble, I've sold to them for a long time, admired all this. They all had every brand manager I dealt with had to spend time in the field.
Yeah.
That was just like, you got to have that experience, that frontline experience. And when you do that, it gives you a different perspective, even if it's just for training or if it's your career. Either way, it's it's very, I don't play an instrument, but I feel like it's very close to jazz, because you are, if you're successful at it, you're not coming in with like, here's exactly what I'm going to do.
Right.
You've got a set of predetermined kind of nuggets, and you may use them, you may not, you may reposition it, you may play off of somebody. I was always that way, because people would go, I'd have to say sometimes, my objective is not to get through all my slides. Okay. So say that up front. Doesn't matter. My objective is to, let's solve the business problem, or let's get to whatever. But there are plenty of folks, and I ran a sales team. It's like, how'd it go? Oh, we spent an hour. That doesn't tell me anything. I don't.
Right.
You were there. What happened? So
that's interesting.
Anyway, yeah, but I agree. It's invaluable experience, and there's nothing like seeing somebody change their mind. It's a beautiful thing. Data can do it too. You're all out there. You all got a little sales in you. You got to, take Joe's advice. Get some selling acumen.
It helps. It helps so much. I think it's one of the most underrated investments people can make in themselves. Because I think we develop a lot of the, especially technologists like us, will develop a lot of the technical skills. We still have to sell this idea to somebody, a stakeholder who has, as you say, the money, right? And a lot of the times, people who are technologists who are very good at this part really suck at the other part, to the point where it almost does them a disfavor to try and go out and sell this. Like, you should just hire a salesperson or Scott to go pitch this for you, because your batting average is probably good. But I think it's something that should be I wish tech teams would focus more on the art of selling, as crass as it sounds, how to sell an idea, right? Every day you're selling, no matter what you think about it. You're selling. I'm trying to sell you on this idea right now. You're trying to sell me and the audience and your idea. Matt sells all the time. Sales is great.
We're all trying to convince each other. Do you?
Yeah.
Do you hear that music? I don't know if you pick up that music. Can you hear that piano music?
I can't hear anything, no.
Okay, fine. My new neighbor plays piano.
Oh, lovely.
Talk about jazz. All of a sudden there's jazz. So it sounds great. I was hoping it was pipe.
Because he picked up on the jazz thing, and he's like, "Oh, I like jazz. I have to be a good neighbor. I have to sell him. I'm a really cool guy."
Back on track,
No, but I mean, communication is one of those things. I wish was just more. I think heavily taught or on tech teams, especially on data teams, like I said, because you have the raw ingredients, I think, to make some pretty compelling changes in a business, i.e. data. It can move the needle, but unless you're good at selling that idea, as well as what the data can do, it doesn't really matter that much,
Find a salesperson. I mean, a great, if you have a data idea or you have a problem you can solve, and obviously pointing data at sales, want to talk about monetizing? That's where the money comes from, coming from sales. If you've got a salesperson who then leverages that insight in a compelling way, have them help you put the pitch together, have them be your voice. And other salespeople are going to listen to salespeople more than they're going to listen to data people.
Yeah.
And same with marketing people, same with finance people, same with operations people, right? So they're all so find those data heroes in those other departments that you're helping, have them be part of your kind of informal team, however you want to structure it, but that they can tell this story as well in their own language, in their own way, and listen to how they do it. Okay. Listen to how they do it, because they're not going to use the terminology you're going to use. As I say constantly, focus on the why, not the how, and you're going to have a better result. Nobody cares how unless they understand the why. And invariably, data people are extremely proud of how they did something and how many ways they tried it and how many things they used. And they love to talk about that. But that's shop talk to other data people on technique. That's not the way to sell it into a business audience that's starting from zero, that's wondering why it's even in the room with you.
Right. The other thing I would say with data people, connecting yourself to sales and marketing, for example, I think puts you a lot closer to the customer, which actually makes you a better data team at the end of the day. Like, if you're able to understand what customers are actually looking for and how they're using your products,
Yeah.
Much better outcomes.
Agreed. Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. I mean, it is,
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's a cliche on purpose. It's like what it's about, right? We all got
It's
customers. You
it's
know,
what it's about.
customers.
Sometimes, the simplest things are the best things too. But it's also the hardest things, right? Like data teams talking to salespeople is like, most people say, "Oh, that's ludicrous. Like, they're data monkeys. You're supposed to be doing that. Do data stuff. Why are you talking to the sales guys?"
Yeah.
But how better to learn what actually happens at a customer level, and talk to people who are actually working with customers every day. We get to deal with the complaints too about maybe your data product not working.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's filtered. Sales guys may not tell you this stuff because they're like, it's not enough of an emergency. I got to go make my quota.
Yeah, they don't. They don't, or they just don't use it.
That's right.
Yeah.
They don't use it, and then you don't get the renewal, and then your stuff isn't used, and then they're tracking activity in this platform or this dashboard, whatever it happens to be, and then that's not happening, and then then you lose the budget for those vendors,
cost
and
center, right?
It falls apart. Yeah,
you're just costing money. Like, oh, why are you spending so much money on Snowflake? Why are we spending so much money on these expensive data engineers? Never talk to the sales team.
Yeah,
and the goal is to not be a cost center, right? The goal is to be like manufacturing. You are producing the product that makes money. You want data to be perceived the same and used in the same way.
Yeah, it's my mentor, the same one who said what your dad said, just shut up and take the sale.
Right.
He also asked him, so how do you make a lot of money? I asked him this when I first met him a long time ago. And he's like, just sell stuff that people want to buy. That's it.
Yeah.
So I was like, you're right, actually.
right. Yeah.
It's the Blackadder school of ideation. If you know that series, there's this moment there where there's two characters always go, a brilliant idea. What is it? That's what we need. A brilliant idea. So, great idea goes here. You got to have it first. So anyway, but yeah, I agree. Just, talk to salespeople, talk. The closer you get to the real activity of your business, I think the more, you're going to have a higher degree of success in bringing value to it. And even though I'm, sound like I'm pounding on data folks, it all comes from trying to help us. It really does. It's not just, even if it's kind of twisted for a dramatic effect here, because back to that other statement I made, I know for sure that data can change the nature of an organization, and the other departments don't have anywhere near that shot. So, that's the overall opportunity of our space. And, we want to see us get there, because we're still talking about how we get there.
We still are talking how to get there.
How do we explain the value? Oh, this. And we come up every year for having to re-justify the nature of the work we do. When, again, if you look at other departments, they are not having to do that. You don't have marketing every year go, here's why we need to do marketing at all.
Yeah. We were just talking about this the other day, actually, because I think there's like an inverse correlation to like how much you shout you add value to the value you actually deliver. So in finance and accounting, right? It's like, okay, I mean, I don't know. Do they add value? Do they shout about how much they add value? No. I mean, they don't process your invoices. Bad things start happening.
No. You don't hear them go, we need to be finance driven. That's what we need to do. Every company's a finance company. When do we? You don't hear that kind of ridiculousness. Do you? I had another post from a friend of mine, really good friend. It's like, she goes, every company is going to be a data company. What do you think of that? It's like, no. Every company's an internet company. Every company's a software company. Every company's why not every company's a paperclip company? No,
right.
That makes as much sense to me. It's like, if you're a manufacturer, you manufacture stuff, you use data. But again, imagine going in to your business organization. We're going to be a data company. It's like, no, I'm selling widgets. I don't know about this, Coop, but I'm doing widgets. I got a widget quota. We're going to move them. I don't know if you can help me with data. That's great. But meanwhile, we're in the widget business.
Right. I saw your comment, by the way.
Yeah. I'm just like trying to be just like, can we, that's distracting. So I feel like those kind of headlines are distracting and ultimately not moving us all forward.
Right.
Anyway.
Cool, man. Well,
all right.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine. I think we're right at time here. Perfect. Yeah. We've made wonderful progress.
You want to plug your book again real quick, and maybe plug what you're up to?
Then I got something at the top of the hour here. So Scott Taylor, the Data Whisperer, telling your data storytelling for data management. Two kinds of data storytelling out there. One for analytics and business intelligence, super important. but there's another kind for data management, stories about why managing your data is of strategic importance to your organization. You can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on technicspubs.com, my publisher. If you use my coupon code Data Whisper, you'll save 20% only at Technics. But get it either way. I'd love to hear if it helps.
Awesome.
And always great to see you guys. Thanks again for having me.
Too. We'll have to have you back on again.
All right, I'll be on again. Let's do another Monday. You know,
it's a regular thing then. So,
yeah.
great to see you. Have a good one.
Super. All right.
Take care, buddy.
Bye, everybody.